right.
No, you have to introduce the show because you're the pro.
Me?
Yeah, you got to do it. You got to take it over.
Hello, and welcome to AI for That. I'm your guest, Noah Kravitz, but my friends here at YouAi said, come on, you're the podcast host. You do the introduction. So how do I introduce myself? You going to make me do that part too?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Today's guest is no stranger to the world of AI podcasting. As host of the NVIDIA AI Podcast, he's been responsible for almost 200 episodes, accounting for more than 4 million listens over the past 5.5, let's call it 6 years. One episode, one interview is the tagline. You all know NVIDIA. I can't do this. It's I'm too self-conscious talking
This is
about
perfect.
myself.
Cut.
I love this.
I think that's the intro. I think
All
just cut it there, no edit. Let's go.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'm excited to chat, Noah.
Likewise, I'm so used to asking questions and trying to stay out of the way, other than to maybe clarify for the audience that heaven help you. Once you prompt me, I might go for a while. So
amazing, because I've got a bunch of questions.
Great.
Yeah. Per your intro, you've spoken to a lot of people for long periods of time.
Yes.
And so I would venture to say you're one of the foremost experts on AI in the world, at least people's perception of what they're doing and how some of these pieces might fit together. So it's a bit of a crazy pace at which things are moving. Like no podcast could keep up with it.
No.
A 24-hour podcast could not keep up with it.
Back in the day when I used to review mobile phones for a living and in writing, but then I started a YouTube channel and that kind of took off back before YouTube was nearly as big as it is now. But one of my contemporaries, he was more of a general computer vlogger than mobile phone specific, but a guy named Chris Perillo. I hope I didn't get his last name wrong. And he used to just stream. This was before Twitch and before any of that. He would just stream constantly. So when you said that, that was my first thought. Was like, I don't even think Chris Perillo could keep up with the pace at which AI is changing right now. It's wild times. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You remember the Subservient Chicken?
No.
Subservient Chicken was this website where there was a guy dressed up as a chicken and had this little text box, and you could basically command him to do things. And he would just be streaming. This is very early days, like 2005.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. People felt like, wow, that's amazing that I could sort of like reach out and get someone to change their behavior.
Was he wearing a chicken suit?
Yeah, he was wearing a chicken suit.
No,
yeah,
but
I'm sure you could Google it and find videos of Subservient Chicken.
There is a video, or was, I assume it's still up there on I don't know if it was on my channel or the company channel, which Phone Dog, the company I worked for back then, was sold. So I think it might be on Slashdot or something. I don't know. But anyway, there's a video that it turned out to be one of my colleagues, but I didn't know what was happening. A man in a chicken suit showed up at the office space I rented back then in this like rundown building in downtown Berkeley, California, where my friend and I got cheap office space because they were converting it into office spaces, but it wasn't. So it was like us, and there was like a robotics lab on the floor above us, and the rest of it was sort of run down. And this dude shows up in a chicken suit. I have no idea what's happening, and does this whole like literal song and dance about me and phone reviews and stuff. And luckily, I had a friend in the office with me, so I didn't feel so scared. And then B, I got the friend to turn the camera on and film it. So my brain's trying to tie the threads together, and I'm hoping it's the same guy who was the Subservient Chicken. I doubt that it was, but early AI model made flesh, it sounds like.
For sure. Boy, we're both old.
Yeah, I know.
But here we are. Listen, here we are still playing with these young kids.
Right.
In this game.
So to speak.
So to speak, yeah. So, and I too have started working with machine learning when I joined Google.
Yeah.
Like, even before that, I think you and I chatted, like before Google, I built a competitor to YouTube, Veo.
I remember Veo.
And we were actually the first ones to do recommendations before YouTube did it. And Dr. Ted Dunning, my chief scientist, is an expert in collaborative filtering. And so we had, even at that time, we were really doing a bunch of interesting stuff. But anyway, in 2012, when I joined Google, I got thrown into product managing these 3 machine learning teams to do this. And since then, I've played and worked and been watching. And now I think like it's really exciting and crazy how quickly these things are moving into like every crevice of the world, like solutions for everything, right? Like countless apps being created every single day.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a microcosm of that on YouAi.
Sure. Right.
Right? Like we've got over 300 apps now.
Yeah.
So every day there's like, looks like a dozen or so new apps and accelerating that are being created. And there's like apps, there's over 20 apps for creators now, like that automate content creation, that analyze audiences, that like help you optimize YouTube titles,
right,
versus thumbnails and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And actually, I guess I can't bring it up on the podcast, but I know of a use case that's being built right now by just again a guy that I casually know to deal with this very sort of unique segment of SMB. And so it's a suite of tools for this niche of SMBs that nobody would have built tools for. Like nobody, certainly.
Yeah.
But yet here it is, they're going to have a suite of AI tools built for that niche.
Yeah.
And that is like super mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's every time I go to the UAI site, which is obviously pretty regularly, my first thought is, ooh, new models, new apps. And then my second thought is, oh, wait, there's like categories, there's new categories, there's different categories. So like, I mean, that to what you were saying, what's the term, the step growth, of just how it's all exploding. I mean, it's just wild. And the emergence of LLMs, obviously, I mean, there's a ton to it and a ton on the technical side to it that you'd be more versed in than I am, but just the way that it's giving people, and I think the tools that you guys have built or are building the platform, the way that it's just putting it into language, giving people the ability to use language they understand, right? They're native, to say to it like, hey, wait, I'm in this super niche, overlooked segment of SMB, but we could really use tools to do these very specific things, and just the ability now, the agency of people to create them.
Totally. Yeah. I think it's the AI version of zip ties and duct tape.
That's a new one.
My mind just went to some dark places.
We haven't heard that one yet.
Once it's well known that once a human learns to use duct tape and zip ties, that you can pretty much finagle any kind of a thing. You can fix all kinds of things. You can make all kinds of things with zip ties and duct tape.
Right.
Or to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, I think is the exact quote. I think that's what, that's what is happening now, is because LLMs can understand unstructured language. You can just say something like this, fuzzily, and say, okay, I got you. I can do that for you. Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah.
And now that you can then go and say, hold on, let me take that power and like package it. So again, people in this like little niche don't have to understand any of that, can just get the benefit of all of that.
Yeah.
Right. That's like profoundly powerful.
Yeah. I mean, you're well familiar with that idea of dissolving the interface, right, between the human and the technology, and the best UIs, UXs have always done that in maybe to a degree, or maybe however you want to phrase it, right? But that idea of just you get into a flow where you're working with the tool. It's the same with any tool that you might use. And so I'm hearing that a lot lately with LLMs, and not just that an LLM, the emergence of LLMs has done that, but even taking it a step further, there's a company that I've been doing some work with that's a no-code platform, right? And so already their whole business is built on that premise of putting the tools into the hands of non-coders, non-experts, right? So that's already there. Now they're working on, and so a lot of using the tool is drag and drop and clicking, and things like user accounts and databases and things are abstracted to make it a little easier. But the main functionality, a button, is already pre-programmed to do button things, and you're right. And so what they're working on now is training an AI model on apps that have already been created on their platform, so that they can start rolling out new tools that basically just let a user either say, build me an app that does blah, 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 or even better, I think, take some sort of nonverbal input, right? Like an app or an app and a logo, or I don't know, I'm sort of extrapolating what they're doing, but just this notion of like, in my head, like I'm already thinking what comes beyond language or in addition to language, and we get into like multimodal LLMs that can take different forms of input and spit out different forms of output. I mean,
I'll tell you one of the next things.
Yeah.
So I have a close friend that's working on an AI project that, and he won't mind me disclosing it here because we've talked about it, that basically allows a brand to show up and say, I would like the ultimate landing page for this, and I need another ultimate landing page for this, another ultimate landing page for this. And all you have to say is generally describe to this thing what are some key messages. You don't have to wordsmith them, very generic key messages, some opinions about what style might look like or what images generally should be like, and then push go. And what this thing does is it creates infinite variants of landing pages.
Right.
Layout, images, message, testing.
Yep.
And then is integrated into the ad buy, meaning into traffic. And basically it's just constantly producing A/B tests and optimizing for whatever it is you want to optimize for.
Yeah.
Conversion or sales, whatever. So self-tuning gets rid of like every meeting ever had about wordsmithing and should it be this image or that image? It says, I got all that.
Yeah.
And we're just going to let the data figure it out. And so I think that kind of optimize anything. This is an example of optimized landing page, but optimize anything is really, I think, the next phase of all of this, which is don't make me have to figure out how to do it. Here's what I'm trying to get done. Go.
Right.
Yeah.
And then this thing figures that out.
Well, so
I think that's the dream. I mean,
meaning as a marketer, you think that's the dream?
As a marketer, I think that's the dream. I actually got drinks with an old boss of mine. He's now leading a company, but comes from a CMO background, is CEO, was CMO. And he was asking me, he says, you're working in AI now. How do you feel about this for marketers? And I said, I think it's great. I come from a creative background. I feel like we've already lost many aspects of super creativity, because if it's not resonating with the customer, then it doesn't matter. I've said to Dmitry many times, the data will tell us what to say. Like, it doesn't matter what I think is better. It doesn't matter what I think is more effective. In reality, it's probably going to be the video that sounds weird with someone talking too fast that works best. And that makes me feel like creativity is already limited. So let's just let it optimize itself. And then the real creativity comes in from strategy or from new ideas and concepts that can then be further optimized, if that makes sense.
So Liz, as a marketer, what's your take on this idea that generative AI is going to break SEO and the whole game is going to change sooner than later anyway?
That's fine. I think digital marketers, especially if you worked in digital marketing, SEO hasn't been around for even the entirety of my career. You guys talk about being old guys on the block. I'm a little bit behind, but it hasn't even been it hasn't even been the entirety of my career. Right. So digital marketing has evolved over and over and over again. So I'm ready and excited for the next evolution. I have no problem with things breaking, iterating, and having to find out what the new playground is. That's why I like digital marketing, because it's not the same every year. I would lose my mind if we just.
Another way I think of looking at this is, so even though this thing is packaged as like a landing page optimizer today, actually I think that you asked a different thing, but I'm going to riff off it a little bit. So I think what you meant by AI breaking SEO is sort of a glut of AI produced content and existing SEO algorithms being sort of polluted by that and playing more of a game of whack-a-mole, et cetera. That's how I interpret it.
Yeah. And then as I'm want to do when Liz was responding to that, I then remembered the other part of the thing that I had heard somebody say that I was sort of half repeating, which gets to the whole idea of the web changing. But that's
that's what I was thinking.
I think I think that's the bigger idea. Is I think the sort of human produced content to be left there that somebody might discover it is not the right way to do content. Being able to communicate something to another human is really important. And so Liz and I with every other person I've ever worked with, and marketer especially, spend countless hours of my life staring at wordsmithing messages and subheadings and all of that, always knowing that it's a futile effort because you're just going to take some best stab, but you're not really the audience. Maybe you are part of the community with whom you're communicating, and so you have a bit of an edge over a regular person, but generally it's all crapshoot. But if a machine can help us say, okay, great, what's the general thing you're trying to communicate? Let me then go create ultimate variants, number of variants of this, test them all out and say, this is the way that things make the most sense to people. The data shows that this one is the best. Well, that's amazing.
So
agreed.
And this is maybe an opportunity to sort of, I was going to say to test how much I understand what YouAi is doing, but I don't think that's the right way to phrase it. So what happens if and when instead of me going to Google and typing in, I want to buy, I don't know, whatever I need to buy. We need an example. I want to book a trip to Japan for my family, right? Instead of that, there's a system, and I like to use the word agents, but I don't know if I'm using it quite precisely, but something akin to what I understand YouAi is doing, right? Like there's a technological system that's able to understand me in a meaningful way, right? So you guys are using the phrase index your mind. So a system can index my mind, and then it can go out onto the internet and act on my behalf. So if and when we get to a point where there are all of these index models, agents, digital twins, whatever you want to call them, running around on our humans' behalves online, is it going to be then that like these landing pages or whatever landing pages turn into are sort of being optimized to best interface with these agents? And then the agents can sort of take that, and like the agent can understand, the YouAi system understands what I want better than I do. So it can go out and interact with the travel agency agents, so to speak.
Right.
And then Grok, like it's just these layers of abstraction that we never see, because in the end, it just feels like, oh, this is better than Google because it really knows what I was trying to get at, even if it didn't.
Imagine if everything that is the web today that has front ends made for human eyes, that all of those front ends, they're not going to go away. They're still there. If humans want to go peek at them, great. But the real value is that now that we have these proxies, these agents that understand us, but yet can work at wire speed. So they can do research a million times faster than we can.
Right.
And they can just go and look at, in a sense, the API part of those websites instead of the front ends. They can consume the front ends too, like they do that now. Like you can make YouAi, Mind Studio AIs that take a link or a bunch of links and go grab them, retrieve them, parse them, get rid of the ads, and summarize them for you and say, hey, this thing that you just sent me to, you didn't have to do the long read. Here are the bullet points. Here are the things in there that you might want to watch out for because those seem inaccurate.
Mhm.
Because as I index the rest of it, this seems like this might be wrong, or this might be biased, or here's why it might be biased. Because the author, you're like, meaning it can do all of that other stuff that you need to be thinking of a human is doing, that most people can never do. In fact, nobody could ever do. This thing can just do that, and we can already do that. But as more and more of these agents become used out there, the way people build these backends is going to get simpler. And less expensive, because you really don't have to build for humans. That a lot of that cost is in that front end because humans are weird. And also that's the same thing of like, what's the messaging to them? Like in size, typography, and all of that like becomes a thing that you have to deal with. With these new things, you don't have to deal with it because the human just engages with their agent. And the agent, if they want, can say, listen, I know the human has a hard time reading. I'm going to make things bigger. I'm going to represent things with images. The agent, in a sense, takes all this data and then synthesizes the interface for the individual user. And depending on who you are, it might be dark mode or light mode, but the extreme of that, it's not dark mode or light mode. It's like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I've got my dashboard to the world and it's smart. It just like tells me stuff. So anyways, I think that's going to be crazy. Another thing that I think is about to be radically, I think just profoundly powerful, is that I think building AIs is the new business, is the new entrepreneurship, is the new side hustle. Like I started building websites in 1995. And I would build them for free. My first website was for LA Fitness in Marina Del Rey in LA. And I went in and I sold it to them. I built it for free and I charged them $30 a month to host it. This was my side hustle. I was working at Fujitsu as a sales engineer. And on the weekends, I was building these things. And then I started getting better at it and found better clients. Now I was charging $10,000 to build websites. Okay, this is 95, 96, 97.
No, you're just a little older than I was, but you're making me think of this guy, Paul, who I went to college with, I went to college in the East Coast, and I worked in the campus bookstore cafe my senior year as a waiter. And I remember Paul would come in and he would have a manila envelope that his mom had sent him from the West Coast. And it had the latest issue of Wired magazine because you couldn't get it on the East Coast yet. And I remember going over and I knew him a little bit and talking to him about it. And this one day he was like, yeah, man, like there's this thing called HTML and websites and people are going to build these. That's where the money is. So yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so then I was making $45,000 a year as a sales engineer in 1995, but I was pulling in some weekends $10,000. In my side projects.
Pretty nice.
But and then whatever, and then we had drop shipping, and we had affiliates, and we had sort of like many things that people try. Like you see people talking about like all these side hustles.
Oh yeah.
Listen, I don't know of any side hustle bigger than this. It's completely greenfield. Like everyone needs AIs, one or many, any type of business, any niche, any community, whatever. And somebody's got to go out and build all of these things for them and launch them and let them pay for it. And again, now that we've got payments, people are already making, meaning they're already people who have subscribers.
Yeah, I noticed that. Another thing I noticed, whichever visit it was back to the website, was the first time I saw the YouAi Mind Studio. Was the first time I saw a paid option.
Yeah,
I knew it was being worked on, but seeing it out there, and I was like, people are monetizing now. This is great.
Yeah, we quietly launched it. We didn't even announce it yet, but we quietly launched it, and so now these are businesses. So like you can. That's the crazy thing about it. Like even back in the day, like it would take me the weekend to make this website.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But now, like it takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, maybe an hour to make like crazy AI apps and push a button and just have them be a link and people can go and pay you for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a friend, one of my CFOs once told me that one of his Harvard Business School friends told him that the best business is a PO box that collects checks, that receives checks, right? It's like no employees, nothing to do. It's just a PO box that receives checks.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is better. because
You don't have to rent the
digital.
video.
They're digital deposits. You don't even have to cash the checks.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
You guys do a deal with Cash App and everything's set.
Yeah, well, let's just use a Stripe. So like use as regular credit cards.
You would say that as a podcast host.
I know. I'm just
Cash
trying to
App.
throw in what are probably no longer relevant cultural references everywhere I can.
Yeah.
Get one of my kids on here to keep me in check.
So like I think that is super exciting to me. Like
do you see, and I don't mean, I always worry that I'm going to sound disingenuous or humble braggy in some weird way when I say this. And I don't mean it this way. It's just how my mind operates. But do you see a delta where the people who pay for these AI models, these apps, stop paying for them because they realize that they can spin it up themselves? Or is it just kind of like, for as long as business has existed, right? There are people who are just like, no, I'm busy doing this.
Yeah.
And I will pay you to do that thing for me because that's what I need.
Good question.
Yeah. It's a great question. I believe, and history has shown, that people optimize for convenience, and there's like a sort of an equilibrium, a threshold of convenience versus price. And so if the price is not radically higher than the convenience and utility that it provides, they'd rather do that. Like, for example, in content creation, like everybody knows now that you're not supposed to edit your own videos.
Right.
That's the first thing you're supposed to do, is not, you need to know how to edit your video. And as quickly as possible, outsource that to somebody else to do it, because you're better off doing content production. This is the same thing. Like, most people shouldn't have to build AIs or learn to be prompt engineers or do all that. Why should they? But they should just get amazing tools they can use. And as long as the cost is the right, if the price is the right price, then everything should exist.
Yeah. I think the advent of the LLM, right? Like, I mean, obviously, saying what everybody knows, flipped sort of the script and opened things up in a way that made me start wondering that, because previously I've been doing the podcast for going on 6 years now, and I've worked with NVIDIA mostly as a content creator, some videos back in the day, and then a lot of writing over the years for however long, 15, 16 years now, right? So I've been around AI in that respect for a long time. But with the podcast in particular, a lot of the first several years of it, we were either talking to people associated with big organizations that had the means to be working on AI, right? So like, government, universities, big businesses, et cetera. And mostly we were talking to either like hands-on technical people, engineering leaders, that kind of thing, or we'd get the occasional like C-suite person to come on and sort of talk big picture about stuff. And then every so often, and these were often the episodes I enjoyed more, perhaps because I could relate to these people on a personal level a little more, we'd get kind of like the outliers who realized that their gaming PC was suddenly like the perfect tool for building modern AI, right? And so we'd get somebody who retired lawyer who had worked in fine art for a long time and got interested in developing a way to use AI to authenticate if a work of art was original, that kind of stuff. And in the past, whatever it's been, 12 months, 18 months, it's just kind of like, I mean, the number of pitches that I'm getting for people who want to come on the podcast has exploded, as you might imagine.
Right.
But it's like everybody's just building something on an LLM or doing something with an LLM. And my first sort of like old guy skeptic take is sort of like, well, this isn't really. And then you kind of look under it and it's like, well, no, of course, that's what everybody's doing, because, we would talk on the show about this idea of democratization of tools as hardware and compute got cheaper, right? And the GPUs, people realizing like, I can play Crisis on it, I can build an AI with it. But then, and the tools, the frameworks, PyTorch and whatever else were getting easier to use in the open source community, sharing and everything. And then the LLM thing just kind of blew it wide open, where it's not like I can go in and spin up a model that is going to do important work on material science. But as a content creator, a guy who's been writing forever, suddenly it's like, whoa.
This is the LLM can go and spin up the model for doing material science. The
Right,
problem
I'm sure
was
it
you
can,
couldn't explain what the model needed to do as human, a non-expert.
Right.
But now I think that's the real power that you're pointing at. Is humans are the bottleneck.
Yeah.
Humans are the bottleneck. It's been obvious. Humans are the bottleneck. Our inability to, how many things must we type? How many form fields? What must we fill out?
Right.
And how much knowledge must we have on how to do all of this and configure it in order to be able to leverage machinery, right? Like go try to get even 99% of developers to go and deploy something into the cloud, which is actually extraordinarily easy on one hand if how to do it, and infinitely difficult if you don't.
Yeah.
But an AI can instantly do it because the complexity is trivial to it. Right. And all it needs to understand is like, what is this flawed human trying to get done? Right. And that's where LLMs are already, in a sense, good enough to do most of that stuff. And it can only get better, especially once we index our minds. And then again, the interface to the human is the problem. And the more that becomes digitized and higher density, more resolution to it, more data points about me, about you. Like all of that is going to go crazy optimized.
Yeah.
I was reading earlier this week, and I then saw something that Zoom has since walked this back a little bit. So I don't know the specifics.
Privacy.
That the terms of service saying like anything you do on Zoom, we own the data. And then they sort of walked it back. But I was reading that, and then I was also reading something just yesterday, and forgive me, was it, I don't want to badmouth a company by mistake.
Oh, let's do it.
Yeah, it might have been Khan Academy, I don't know. But there was an educational, I was reading an ed tech newsletter. Long time ago, I was a teacher. My wife is an educator. We have kids in school, education, And I was reading something about a new learning experience, immersive learning experience thing where students are actually interacting with the computer, right? It's not just taking a digitized test, but it's an interactive thing. And whatever the company was in their terms of service, it was talking about how they're able now to, I mean, not now, I'm sure it's been around, but they're able to like track the cursor on the screen and extrapolate that into whatever other arenas, right? They're able to track the whole process of the student engaging, trying to work through the problems, where they need help, where they don't, how does the system respond, et cetera, et cetera. And the terms of service saying like, we own that data, right? If you're using our thing, then you consent that we can collect the data around what's happening, right? And so somebody commented on this newsletter about how on the one hand, what a potentially cool and powerful thing to use generative AI to serve up these sort of personalized, tailored, everything from adapting the curriculum to adapting the actual interactive activities, et cetera.
Totally.
On the other hand, the company who owns all of the data of users using this is going to have the ability to create the most sophisticated digital mental models of people and how people learn and how people engage that anyone's ever had. And what could that mean to this company's future prospects as dominating of sort of dominating some sector of, then what is it, right? Is it education? Is it humanity? Is it whatever? And it's, I don't know, it's wild to, if nothing else, doing the pod for so long has made me understand the value of data in a way that I didn't before, even when my job was just to crank out as much content as possible. And it's thinking about that stuff and the future sort of upsides and downsides of what these indexed mental models could mean. Putting the dark side away for a second on an individual level, I mean, the implications for education and education as formal or informal as you want to make it are just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, some of the work that we're doing at YouAi is this Mind Studio, which is enabling the creation of all of these AIs that consumers can engage with. The other side is this mind digitization side, right? And they're related because, again, the more the system knows about the consumer, the better the system can service the consumer. Right. It's really that, right? And obviously there are privacy implications, So, we got to take data collection and storage and access extraordinarily seriously.
Which you are. So
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously the human needs to voluntarily want to do this. But the value is profound. Like we're about to digitize, we're about to get infinitely better at learning, I think. And I specifically that term infinitely, meaning sort of getting asymptotically close to that exponential.
Yeah.
Because today learning is generic. Even personalized learning is generic. It's not individualized. It's whatever. I've got 5 kids.
Yeah.
If math textbooks had all examples were about Pokemon,
right,
because they're really into Pokemon,
right. Yeah,
then their attention would be radically different than if it's about apples or something else, right? Again, it's a trivial example.
Yeah.
And to your point, is like once the system can figure out what state the learner is in, and it's not just for children learning, it's for adults. That's all we do, right? Like we're just learning beings.
Yep.
Like this ability to be able to get the right things delivered to us in the right format is going to radically accelerate human evolution. Yeah.
Do you think it will affect? One thing that just popped into my head was I was a big reader as a kid. We didn't have TV, wasn't allowed to really watch much TV until after I was 16. And
then what happened? Did you just binge for 3 years?
Oh yeah. Oh, and I'm still a binger. It's like the kids that never got candy and now they just like can't stop. But the reading so much, I've had many people in my life tell me that the speed you can process information, your ability to do math, like all of that paved through reading, and your ability to learn is one of those key things that I feel like even when you go to college, they're like, we're not teaching you the material, we're teaching you how to think, how to learn. And so I'm kind of curious if everything is personalized and catered toward us, is there a possibility that we become worse learners? We're taking more in, but we become worse at learning new information unless it's like formatted for us in this very personalized way.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Maybe. but again, that might be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because this thing is going to be so far outweighed. Maybe this is the only right way to learn moving on. Mm-hmm. Because it's just so efficient. And so you might get weaker, but you will still be able to grok a lot more because this thing is helping you grok.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because my mind, Liz, went to like 3 different places when you said that, right? And one is this whole idea that Dmitry was just talking about personalized learning and everything from leveraging high interest topics, Pokemon, to addressing learning styles and learning differences. And I recently discovered something called bionic reading, which is a way of, it's almost like a font family. It's a way of showing the alphabet on the screen that like highlights certain parts of letters and certain places in words and leaves the other parts alone. And it helps people with dyslexia. I think it actually might just be beneficial to everybody, but it's targeted toward people with dyslexia to help them just sort of, sort of complement the way that their brains and their eyes and their brains process the text. Right. So things like that, where there's a huge upside. And then I was thinking about sort of like the echo chamber bubbles that we, or some of us, myself included, tend to live in, right? And so the kinds of news that I do or don't read, or political opinions that I don't engage with, or just don't pay attention to because of my own political opinions and then my own feelings about agency and politics and what I can do or can't do to change this, all that kind of stuff, right? And so if it's my own uninformed opinion, but if the benefits of all of the positive individualization that can just help somebody understand material that they might not have been able to otherwise for whatever reasons, uninterested, literally can't read the text on the screen, don't have the vocabulary, whatever it is, balanced against what you bring up, if everything's catered towards what you like, is that going to diminish your ability to extrapolate the information into a different setting mentally, or engage with somebody else who is coming at it from a totally different point of view? And then I started thinking about Ready Player One, and if we're all just living in the stacks and we're plugged into the metaverse all the time anyway, is that just going to change? Is it not going to matter because it's going to create this new set of expectations in this other reality that will be tuned to these systems anyway, because they're built on top of these digital systems? And that's a long-winded way of saying maybe, right?
Yeah, well, and like another example of that, like if people remember Zuck's demos of metaverse, and that people in the metaverse don't have legs.
Yeah.
And that's true. You don't need legs in the metaverse. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you can move around even faster without legs, because they sort of get in the way.
In your way.
And so same thing here. Like you get some superpowers. You can't walk anymore, but you can fly everywhere.
Right.
Flying faster, better. It sort of feels like walking. You're hovering, right? And so as long as the trade-off is meaningfully better, I think we'll find that that's okay if we think in a radically different way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we adapt. And,
yeah. Cool. It looks like we're probably coming up to our hour.
I do have one, just because we have you. No,
yeah. Ask me a question. I never get asked questions. I always ask.
No, so. I have. My question is, you don't have to name names, but you probably, as mentioned, receive more pitches than anyone else about AI companies. You decided to work with us, so you must believe in what we're doing, which feels good. What are you? Give me an example of something you've seen, no names needed, where you're like, that's just a crockable. I just want to know. I just want you to tell people what, because there's a lot of incredible things happening. There's also a lot of hype.
Sure.
And I think people they're struggling to tell the difference. So what's your crockable?
I mean, I think, man, I just have to get this out of my brain so I can actually address the actual question. There's a whole separate thing that's like the art of the pitch and the art of communicating with people. And this predates the NVIDIA podcast, because as I mentioned before, back in the day, I was covering the mobile phone industry and reviewing phones and associated gadgets. And so I got a lot of pitches through that as well. And so I think there's sort of that first layer of like, do I even sort of like and trust, not even the person, right? But sort of like how they've chosen to represent this thing. So that can sometimes cloud judgment unfairly, or in this case, I mean, I like the way that you initially said, hi, Liz, right? And so I was like, oh, like this is an authentic thing, so I'm going to engage with this person. And then I was able to find out more about what YouAi is, and you guys wanted to do a podcast and all that stuff in it. But I think that, I don't know if this is going to answer your question. I'm not trying to dodge it, but maybe it'll work around to it. I've always had issues personally around the whole notion of like, we grow up, and I'm saying my background growing up in America, and then a lot of the world, but not all of the world. But you grow up and you're expected to go to school, and then at whatever age school ends, and for a lot of people in the US, it's high school. Not everybody, some people before that. And then a lot of people go on after high school for more education, but let's call high school, right? And you graduate high school, and then you go figure out what you're going to do for a career or for work, right? And so the expectation of life is that you're making money. And I fully understand. I'm not like, I wish it was different, I guess is what I'm trying to get at, right? And I don't mean it as like oh, poor me, like whatever. My life, I was born into a good situation. I'm very fortunate. But I think there's more to life than just trying to earn a living, right? And so I'm sort of right now a little more interested in, and I say this full well knowing that like I have to do things to earn a living. So I'm not, and we all, but I think where companies, organizations are looking to do something more than just sort of turbocharge or optimize the current ways of making money for making money's sake that we have.
Okay.
I'm personally a little bit more interested in things that are trying to go beyond that. And so like that's kind of my sort of prejudgment. So like I'm not necessarily saying that I'll look at a pitch that's like, hey, we've got this AI system that can beat SEO every time. And so you will get a bigger ROI on your marketing spend. I'm not saying that's a crock. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that like my own personal interest, and broadly speaking, at least for the NVIDIA podcast, what a lot of times we're doing is trying to look a little beyond that kind of thing.
Right.
At the same time, I think that, and this almost in a way is answering a question with a question, but I've a lot of people are talking about LLMs, and then this idea of there's something called like, I think Auto GPT, and then something called like a baby AGI. There are different names for things I saw on GitHub.
Yep.
Beginning of this calendar year, January through like March, April, I was way down the rabbit hole on Reddit, the Reddit chat GPT forum, all these things, just and installing things on my computer I probably shouldn't have, just to experiment with these things and see what they could do. And so people who are talking about LLMs as an early form of artificial general intelligence or super intelligence, I have a little bit of skepticism around that. And it's skepticism sort of fused with a lot of curiosity, right? And so like, I don't know, the whole concept of AGI is something that's in the back of my head, and something that earlier I almost interrupted your flow, Dmitry, to ask you. And I was like, A, don't interrupt him, and B, like, let's not take the conversation there right now. But I don't know, notions of the genie getting out of the bottle and sentience, and we've built this thing, but if we don't do something to rein it in right now, it's definitely going to get out of control and destroy us all. I'm not saying that's not a real threat, but I have been wondering a lot about ulterior motives and reasons for people of all sorts talking about that, and kind of where we're really at technology-wise.
I think that totally makes sense.
And I realized, Dimitri, I realized, Liz, I did not necessarily answer the question.
That's okay.
That's all right. You brought up a fun topic.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think we need to worry about AGI getting out of hand, my personal belief, at this moment. Someday we might need to worry about something like that. Or like killer robots, Terminator, or stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think what we have now is already dangerous enough.
Right.
Because you don't need AGI, you just need modern AI in the hands of people with bad intentions. And especially people with bad intentions and a little technical skill, like state actors or sophisticated individuals, and the havoc you can cause with modern tools, mostly in the form of misinformation and sort of done in a strategic way to tell the right stories to the right groups of people and make them believe that there's all the supporting evidence for that to be true.
Right. And the AGI kind of helps eliminate the human as the bottleneck for creating and disseminating.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Before the bottleneck.
Not the AGI, sorry, the AI. Excuse me.
The AI. Yeah. Before it now, it just would be tremendous lift of all the need to produce this content and put it in all the right places.
Yeah.
And we've seen that happening anyway. Like that's what Cambridge Analytica was. And like since 2015, we've been living in that world. But you needed big budgets and groups of people. Now anyone can do it from the road. You don't have to be in a home. Like you could be hanging out somewhere.
Totally. I'm at the club. Let me just check my phone. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just not ready for it. I mean, those of us that are in the business, like we're pretty good at detecting phishing attempts and social engineering and things like that. But even like I have friends that are technical and in cyber and just make a stupid mistake and get hacked. Right? And for everybody else, they are just like sitting ducks.
Right. When I'm like out of that mindset and I'm looking for like concert tickets was a recent example. I'm so susceptible when I have to check myself that like, this is clearly a scam. There's no way third row tickets are $40, but I'm going to email them anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think these next couple of years are going to be really potentially quite scary because of that. And by the way, if we can get through those and maybe sort of train the population a bit and get us aligned.
Get those younger folks to be a little older and a little in positions of a little more leadership and power. I don't know. I maybe I've crossed the point in my life where I've started singing the Children of the Future song, but
I'm there with you.
It's funny as I think this happened earlier in a conversation, but Liz doesn't want to do. Once I shut up, I then actually started to get an answer to your original question. Great. Companies or people or whoever who pass off basic like analytics, data analytics functions as AI. That's a thing. And I'm not going to name names, but that's a thing that I've seen that kind of gets my goat. And it goes back to not just AI, but I've seen companies do it with like when IoT, Internet of Things, was kind of a big thing. I remember having this conversation with somebody at a company that was like, had rolled out this new IoT thing. And we were talking about it. And I was like, wait, so this is just running on like a phone app. You don't actually have like a device, like a sensor that's somewhere, whatever. He was like, yeah, to be honest, when we talk about IoT, it's more like IO apps. So like there's that phenomenon through time immortal with no disrespect to marketing as a profession, but bad actors, right? Well, stretch the truth.
Yeah.
And so that's been happening where folks saying like, we're using AI to like, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sort of like, that's just analytics. That's not quite like there are AI powered approaches to analytics, but that's not what you guys are doing.
Totally makes sense.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, don't pitch Noah with fake AI.
Yeah, don't.
He'll find out.
I know. We're at, or maybe even a little past time, but can I throw a question back to you guys real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
What's next, and either for YouAi or more broadly with where the tech's going, but kind of like in a near term, like actually going to happen thing? Because I mentioned earlier about multimodal stuff is really interesting to me. The UAI, the Mind Studio stuff that I've used and I've experienced, like is text-based, right? It's like interfacing with chatbots. So am I just over eager and I'm like, what's next? And it's like, well, no, man, there's like a lot of stuff that's going to happen with text. Like, or what do you see on the near horizon?
Yeah, so text already doesn't need to be text because the models can generate Markdown or the models can generate HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So the models can be returning fully rendered apps that look like apps. You never know that there was any AI behind it. You just think it's just a site. So I think it's important to realize that all of those things are made of text, like code is text, and these things can code. And text is certainly the wrong interface for most of these things because a picture says 1,000 words and pictures in a specific kind of layout convey a lot of things, right? So like, I think that's the first thing you're going to see, or one of the things you're going to see in the near term is that what we call LLM is going to feel very, very differently. And the LLM part's just behind the scenes, right? And we'll certainly bring that, and others I'm sure will too. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is we are specifically in Mind Studio model agnostic, and we have this capability for these automations, as we call them, the multi-step workflows. And so we will allow you to call many other models outside of just language models. So diffusion models, image, video creation models, logic processing models, analytics.
That's actually on a very selfish level. That's great that you said that because I have seen the automation stuff. I haven't played with it that much, mostly because I was like, oh, wait, no. I'm going to stick to the text prompting and crafting prompts,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff, because I'm more familiar with it. But yeah.
Yeah, they're really easy to use. Like literally, you can watch 3-minute demo that I did, and
Right.
it sounds actually more scary automations.
Yeah.
They're just they're just a way to create multi-step logic
Yes.
that call out to URLs on the web, right, to be able to bring new data in and process it and merge it, to collect input from the user, to then craft the right message so that the AI can bring back the prediction, the result that you're looking for. So like all of that's straightforward. Now you'll have, multimodal is the way, obviously. And so you'll have more of that. The personalization stuff is already like really powerful. We already have over 1 million data points of explicitly provided signals from people.
Users,
Yeah.
The
Which
indexing thing is so fun. It's just like a fun, like pull out your phone and instead of scrolling social media or playing a game, like just like go through some prompts for a while. And it's fun, but then there's an upside, right? And I keep thinking about the data points and thinking about like, how much incredibly valuable personal data have we all just given away
Unknowingly,
unknowingly, or even like, like I don't really want to enter my like email and address and stuff, but I really want to see what's behind the wall, so I'm going to do it. And now there's like, well, wait, I can actually put this data to use that's going to come back to me in the form of better travel agents, better experiences, better everything. So, and
you can see it right away. Again, like a bunch of the AIs that are created in our AI app store use personalization data. Whatever. One of them is this parenting copilot that I was talking about. Like, it knows my children's names and ages. That's the personalization data it needs.
Right.
And so it knows I have 5 kids. It knows all of their first names, and it knows the year that all of them were born. It also knows, obviously, that the last 2 are twins born in the same year.
Right.
And so now I can ask it for advice, for guidance at any time.
Yeah.
And simply be able to say, Diego's doing this, or Una's doing that, or I'm thinking about Noah doing this. Concern. And like that's just so like seamless.
Right.
It feels ultimately natural.
Do you, when you interact with that, and this is less of a UAI question, I think, than just a general LLM question, but do you, and obviously you're going to, as a parent, you're going to vet any incoming information against your own judgment before you act on it, right? Do you feel a difference in getting info from an LLM versus getting info from a traditional web search?
Yes.
How so?
Well, so the difference is the amount of parsing that I need to do in order to get the answer I want. Because going to websites, you got to go sort of parse their interface, and everybody is verbose and like all this other irrelevant stuff. The other thing is, again, to be able to provide many variables in my query.
Right.
And then have the content be filtered by that situation, right? Like, so it's like custom solution that's being provided by this thing rather than like some hypothetical situation that you find on the web. So I think the results are like better. That one lowers the hallucination piece by lowering the temperature parameter.
Right. Okay.
And so far I haven't noticed anything about it that like seems hallucinatingly.
Right. I did, Liz, I did get a pitch recently, and I haven't actually even read it yet. It was very recent, but the title was something like "The Answer to Hallucinations" or "We've Solved Hallucinations." And that one I was immediately a little like, did you really? Yeah. Okay. But I have to dig in.
Well, you could argue that our humans' perception of the world entirely is a hallucination.
Yes.
I actually subscribe to that, to that metaphysical state, I think. And so therefore, like, the hallucination is good in this case. Like that, we call that creativity. We call that
hallucinating. Got me through some of the darker days of the pandemic.
And then there's that. Exactly. And so, yeah, I think the LLMs are extraordinarily powerful. I think we are not tapping into whatever, even 1% of use cases. Every day I'm seeing people's creativity of the new things that they're trying with Mind Studio. And I'm like, yeah, oh, that's brilliant. Yep, that makes sense. Or like,
Yeah.
and again, and even those I know are like, I swear to you, this is going to be the case. You can watch this. I'm going on record.
Yes.
This is going to feel very similar to YouTube evolution, the evolution of YouTube. When the video started to come in 2005.
Right.
If you looked at those videos and you look at the videos today, they're not in the same medium.
No.
Right.
I wouldn't have a career in today's world. No.
There you go. And this is the same thing we're seeing with AIs. Like, they're amazing.
Yeah.
They're already amazing. Like, I've got a parenting co-pilot that knows everything about children. That's incredible. It's nothing. It's a joke.
Yeah.
And it's going to accelerate so rapidly here because the data is there.
Yeah.
We just need to ask the right questions.
Yeah. No, I was at this event a couple months ago now, this like small generative AI day. It was for investors, and I was a speaker at it, and there were like 5 other speakers, and 4 of the other 5 were all either current or former, like very high up ML engineering leaders from Facebook or Meta. And the biggest takeaway, I think, from the day was 201. They all said some version of what you just said. They were like, look, I've been doing this for however long, my credentials, et cetera, et cetera. I have never seen this sort of like accelerated rate of change, like kind of, we know we're in the opening innings, whatever metaphor you want to use. None of us can with any certainty kind of say like where it's going to be in whatever, a year, 2 years, 3
Next
years.
week.
Next week. Yeah, exactly.
Really?
Yeah.
By the way, I've been speaking with some investor friends, and it's a bad time to be a venture capitalist.
Right.
Yeah.
Because everything is so unstable for them. In the time it takes them to hear a pitch and start to do due diligence, the company is already disrupted.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're doing due diligence on a disruptor, and then they're already disrupted.
Right.
And then you start to say, well, hold on, like you have a few of those, and you start to realize that like none of your old ways of sort of being able to grok where to place your bets.
Yeah.
Actually, in this case, they're all suspect now.
Yeah.
Because even if you got the strong business in something and you can invest on the metrics, the meteor for these is coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And I have a close friend that's reached out to me recently who runs a big company, over 2,000 employees, that has over 1 million customers out there, SMB customers. And they provide creative services for them. And sort of realizing, it's an old company, decades old, and is real in a stable company, a great company, but is realizing that, wow, we're sort of in the crosshairs of this disruption.
Yeah.
Like this thing that we do for these SMBs, their son or daughter can now do from their phone just by talking to it. Like, make me an ad for this or do that. Well, that's crazy. But the approach they're taking is, hey, we just need to lean into it.
Exactly. That's it.
And this is the same thing. Like earlier in the conversation, we were talking about like what's the threshold of somebody wanting to do it themselves versus paying somebody for the thing they've already done, right? A great example of that is like Napster and BitTorrent. I was in the middle of all of that back in the day. And people were like, oh my God, this is going to kill music. It's going to kill music. Right. It's going to kill the music business. The music business is alive and well. Why? Because finally, after a lot of thrashing, like it almost killed music,
they leaned in.
They realized that, what you really need to do is set the right price with the right convenience. And when you do that, of course, this is easier and better than going and playing around with BitTorrent. And that still exists. And some people like to do it the hard way. They're running Linux on their desktop.
Yeah.
Bless their hearts. The rest of us, we just want convenience and to go about our lives.
Yep.
And we're willing to pay for that. And I think this is the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, great to see you, Noah.
I'm
you
super
too.
excited
that we did this.
Fun to connect in this context.
Yeah.
Great to have you.
I love talking about this stuff. And again, the NVIDIA pod is wonderful because I get to speak directly to all of these people who I wouldn't have the chance otherwise. But it's fun once in a while to get to spout my own opinions on these things out, even if they're all very, it's sign of the times. Everything's in flux and progress. So it's observing and synthesizing and feeling and then sort of making some predictions, which kind of sounds like what AI does, but without
Totally. Good to see you. Thanks for
All
coming.
right, good to
See
see
you
you.
all
Thanks for having
soon.
me.
Thanks for listening. Noah, great to have you.
My pleasure. Everybody, you can go subscribe the NVIDIA AI podcast wherever you get your podcast. Right next to this one, subscribe to AI for that. The NVIDIA pod's not on YouTube, so if you're on YouTube, you might have to click to the other window. But yeah, it comes out a couple times a month. It's a lot of fun. That's my
Amazing.
plug as a guest. I figured.
No, I love it. It's perfect. No, that's I
Great.
need to learn to do that. That's awesome. Okay, see you guys.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Okay, bye.